Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're watching this. It's good for me. It's going to be good for you too. Today we have a very exciting program. Usually before I interview somebody, I take the opportunity to take a look at their Twitter timeline, see what they're talking about lately, and see what's motivating them. And in this case, if I would have looked, this would have been the last thing I would have seen. Malcolm, a little bit rough on somebody who should have known better, starting up with him. And we're going to talk about that. Maybe not too much, but I figured I better share the screen. I'm not going to read it. I'll get banned too. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you the only Malcolm Flex. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I had to give myself a round of applause, just kind of like walk out to the virtual stage. There we are. There we are.
Malcolm, you are an interesting personality. Besides the fact that I'm intensely jealous of your incredibly deep voice. Not to mention the pecs. My God, look at that guy. Look at that guy. I think this would be, you're one of those few guests who I'm going to ask to explain the Malcolm Flex story. Who are you?
Who am I? Well, I guess now since I've been depersoned, nobody. But once upon a time, I will unravel a yarn for you.
Please do.
A young individual, very much outspoken about politics, started out, I want to say, several years ago, started out as liberal, entering college. Wasn't really that big into it, but, just enough. I think during the advent of Black Lives Matter, I was like, okay, I can kind of see this, but, I also see the other side of things. And very centristy. I was a centrist from the beginning, but still, default liberal. Then I started to move a little bit of right of center as, Black Lives Matter started to take off and the politics around everything started to get a little bit crazy. Obama wasn't fulfilling a lot of his promises, bargains, and, I was observant enough to notice it. So then it all snapped when I finally got involved on Twitter. And I actually became a bit of an anarcho-capitalist, and I actually created a large-scale group that is now defunct after one of our members got themselves killed like an idiot. But again, that's
what kind of a group was it? Was it a Twitter DM group?
Not even.
Was it a street gang? Was it a football team?
No. Yeah, don't worry. We hadn't gotten to that. It was about 300 strong, just individuals of a voluntarist kind of ideology. And, we would share ideology. We were planning on organizing real world meetups to think about how we could canvas and, enlighten people by using flyers and campaigns and things.
What do you all have in common besides general agreement on your politics? Were you about the same age? Were you a lot of the guys were black?
No, I was actually the youngest at the time. I want to say I was like 23 or 24. And, again, it was all just politics. And we had ANCAPs, we had ANCOMs, had anarcho-syndicalists, mutualists. Everybody else just kind of under that anarchic spectrum, basically. We all just wanted to get together and say, hey, if we want to make this happen, we got to do what the Libertarian Party's doing. We've got to create a general platform, show people that it can be done, that, personal responsibility and the NAP can govern. Again, I was young, idealistic at the time. So
now you're old. Now you're old and cynical, I guess, right?
Yeah. You took the word right out of my mouth. Old, jaded, and cynical. The bronze age of 28. And I am.
You're over the hill. You got to learn how to just cruise like me from this point on.
I do. I'm finding the cruise control buttons. It's a little bit of a newer car that I'm in now, so I've got to get familiar with the controls. But yeah, that led me over to the Twitter sphere. And something that a lot of people actually don't know is that I was actually one of the early progenitors of the Hotep movement during its peak. So I actually became.
Tell listeners about Hotep, because a lot of Ron Coleman fans don't get it, or maybe are intimidated by what they've seen. And not every Hotep guy out there is necessarily someone I want to hang out with either.
No.
That's true of any group.
Yeah.
Can you take a minute and explain the concept?
I can. So
Please do.
Again, understanding Hotep is a little bit interesting because there are so many different variations, flavors, and offshoots of what we would call Hotepism. So I'd say the branch that I kind of was a part of, and it's not even, this is unspoken. It's almost de facto, not like, de jure or, it's a spoken rule, but I was more of the mainstream, the Hotep Nation, the one that the banner at Hotep Jesus pretty much claimed. So this was the more mainline Hotep movement. You've got a lot of individuals in Hotep. They all go by the Kemetic ideology, this whole ancient Egyptian, returning to a state of Black nobility that, pretty much originates back out into, southern southern Central Africa, that sort of ideology. So it's comprised of a lot of Black nationalists, Pan-Africanists, a lot of individuals that are Hebrew Israelites, and some NOI individuals. It's really this interesting conglomerate of a bunch of African-centric ideologies all tied together by a string of conservative values. And that's where, again, a lot of conservatives and Hoteps found common ground, was because they're fairly conservative in terms of outlook, but the issue is there are a lot of other wedge issues and just different flavorings and things that just don't fit into modern discourse, or that are pretty much identitarian in nature. But unlike I guess you should say, now embraced identitarians, it's a little bit different because they don't use that whole identity sort of thing to try to shape policy. Rather, they use that as a uniting factor amongst themselves and a call to do better. So that's the positive of it. So, I know, I knocked you off your seat with that one. That was.
So if you were to ask, what's the difference between Hotep and Nation of Islam besides Islam? Mm-hmm. What would be your answer?
Hotep is a lot broader barrel, or it's kind of like a cone and a funnel. So Hotep would be a much wider collection. So it's like, it starts out very big. The entry to the funnel is Hotep. Then NOI, there's a very different outlet spigots. And I'm not even that well versed when it comes to NOI, because I never got into that. But NOI would be basically like one of these tiny little spigots at the end of this very broad funnel. So Hotep is a lot more broad in its tenets, that you just mainly believe in just Black self-improvement and, to an extent, preserving the Black community, rebuilding Black fatherhood, that sort of deal. And there's a lot of other, again, little spigots that you can find yourself fitting into. So broad banner versus tiny banner.
All right, Malcolm. Well, I appreciate your taking us through that little digression, because I think it's more or less what I understood the answer to my question to be. So I suppose now, back to what you were saying, you actually were kind of one of the early guys on Twitter who kind of moved Hotep along.
Yeah, at some point, I came in probably, the movement had already had its core players. I know we share a group with, I guess his name is not Adonis now on Twitter, but he was actually heavily involved. There was a lot of, just key figures. Again, Hotep Jesus and Uncle Hotep being the core players. Hotep Jesus was actually the creator of the original mainline Hotep movement. And Hotep Jesus kind of came along, Ali, as we called him, pretty much. He came along and brought his marketing expertise and helped sort of, proliferate and catch that core group of individuals. And then I came along, I was attracted to it because at the time I was very jaded by the current state of Black affairs, which was this whole victimhood, police brutality, we getting killed all over the place. And it didn't gel right with me, because I felt like anytime I try to have a conversation with people about personal responsibility, okay, but these are the things we can do to improve our chances and improve our standing, people didn't want to hear that. They wanted none of it. And so when I found a pocket of Hotep, I was like, okay, you know what? I can kind of jive with these guys. This is good. And it worked for a bit. And I actually ended up, getting so heavily involved that we had an election, and I actually ended up winning the vice presidency of the Hotep movement, with Hotep Jesus basically existing as the shadow player behind that somehow still, again, profiteered off of most of our exploits. So,
Oh, did he?
oh yeah, that's an interesting saga. Again, there's a reason why I left, and it's a whole long
It ends
saga.
up kind of getting involved with multi-level marketing, right? And these,
Mhm.
this whole, and this is the kind of thing, and I see it a lot among black guys who I encounter in the conservative part of Twitter, is that there's a lot of Ed Lattimore. There seems that someone's always selling something,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
and that I don't know if we necessarily have time for that, but use the word profiteering, so that kind of made life. I'm not saying that Ed's doing anything wrong. I think he's a real match from what I
Yeah.
can
Oh,
tell.
dude, Ed's awesome. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with profiting. It's just that you can't let profit become your only motivation. Otherwise, then your movement is basically a front group to line your pockets. And that's what ended up happening. And that was where, again, we just had a core divergence, and I left the movement. And, after that, I think the mainline movement, the Hotep Nation movement, fell apart and just became Ali and Uncle Hotep as it is. And now that, rather than an actual structured group, they've just got they've got fans, and it's them, the key personalities, which is arguably a more streamlined way to run a group, to be honest, rather than having, hierarchies and structures and, positions.
Especially if you're anarchists or anarcho anything, right? These
Yeah. Yeah.
provocateurs of order, are
Mhm.
not exactly consistent with that ideology. All right, so
Definitely.
now we're past the your Hotep moment,
Hmm.
and you start developing your own persona to a large extent.
Oh yeah, yeah. That ended up taking off real quickly. I didn't even realize it was happening, but I started to get in contact and just start sitting in on lives and becoming known to a lot of who we would call the conservative power players today. People like Jack Posobiec, Will Chamberlain, Mike Cernovich, Raheem Kassam, and Ian Miles Chung. A lot of them. It was just sort of a falling into place, and I started to become recognized and unique perspective. But then it's like, but hey, this guy's also black, and it's like, but hey, this guy's black, but he's not like milk. He's not so milk toast that he doesn't appeal to black people. Like, he's black, but he still keeps a black flavor.
And he's
And
also not one of these fake black accounts.
oh God, the first Manny, yeah, I know that was a fun one.
I am sure that I've fallen for some of this myself. Is that guys, conservative guys want to show that we're down with the revolution, and a cool black guy's picture shows up he follows you, and you say, oh, this guy looks like guy, he's not necessarily the kind of guy I would necessarily follow him based on following and his influence or status, but he's a black guy. Let me do a little voluntary affirmative action on social
Yeah,
media. And how many of those turn out to be fake accounts or fake black guys?
exactly. Yeah, man. The key to that is you always got to look at their replies, or tweets and replies, to actually see, okay, like, does this guy actually interact with a larger segment of black guys, or is he only engaging with conservatives? And what do his non-timeline wall interactions look like, to really see whether or not they're genuine? So yeah, that's interesting, because I didn't fit that mold, and I also didn't talk about racial politics a lot. Like, I really had a very I had an interesting penchant for geopolitics, financial matters, again, science. So it was really a mishmash, and it just created
You
a
work in
unique
science, right?
equilibrium. Yes,
But
I
I
am.
mean, without blowing your not very deep cover, what kind of work do you do?
So research, pretty much. I am a multi-purpose researcher. I actually interface with a lot of CROs that would like to conduct research using a patient population. And I serve a couple of different roles normally. sometimes I'm in the lab, just depending on what kind of study I'm working. If it requires me to actually go in the lab, do some, collect samples, process, work with the samples, take them through whatever measures they need, and then send off and extrapolate whatever data needs to be done. That's the general idea that people have of research. But I also do a lot of the more technical aspects, which is handling the administrative aspects, interfacing with the different IRBs, a lot of data monitoring,
All right, hold on. CROs, I figured out, Chief Research Officer.
Mm-hmm.
But what's an IRB?
Well, clinical research organization. But the IRB.
This is medical research?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Thankfully, I'm not in bench work or academia or any of that. I could not. So again, when you're working with human subjects, you actually have to have an IRB, which is called the Institutional Review Board. And so what they typically do is they actually will, number one, evaluate the scientific merit of what you're doing, making sure that you're going by, again, a lot of fail-safes that we have in place for conducting human research, as well as just, just general compliance and documentation, making sure that you got signature, making sure informed consents are actually informed consent, when you're consenting people, they can actually understand it. There's a lot that the IRB tends to do, and there are very different forms of IRB. So, and when you're dealing with a lot of companies, they'll go through what's called the WERB, or the Western IRB, which is a more commercial IRB. And the benefit of that is that you can pretty much, the average IRB probably meets once a month, and they've got X amount of studies that go on within an institution that they have to actually share, talk about, table, discuss, and all this. Whereas WERB, they only exist to allow companies to basically have an IRB sanction their research. So that's, and then there's also things like CERB. There's a whole lot to the world of.
All right, so that stuff creeps into your timeline because that's the work you do. That's the lens through which, to some extent, you see the world. I mean, you don't have decades and decades as a lawyer or as a researcher, so that the challenge of getting outside your own box in evaluating things hasn't necessarily overtaken you. So you're still a fun follow. And then you're taking off on Twitter, and you were developing this unique persona. I mean, a little bit rough edge sometimes. You got banned almost a year ago to the date. It was August of last year.
I know.
And what was that one again? Remind me.
That was the whole copy pasta where, what's his name? Ben something that works for CBS News wrote this piece and called us all Russian disinfo bots, even though I had a banner with myself. I had made prior videos showing myself actually speak. And it was interesting because a lot of because we were doing that to make fun of somebody that was obviously a bot. Patriot J and I, we actually got to the point where we were like, look at this guy. Is this guy serious? This guy right here, this guy's grifting. Come on, let's go ahead and take that same thing. Let's do it. Then Jake Coco got involved, and a lot of our followers got involved, and we just all had a hooting good time with it until, unfortunately, conservatives actually started reporting us too, because they were so confused by what was going on. And then liberal,
you're doing too good of a job of simulating a bot.
Oh my God, it was. Man, we had the beeps and the boops on cue. We were speaking out binary code on the time. It was fun. It was fun until it wasn't.
All right, but then they got you back, and you came back.
Oh man, did we come back? It was a comeback of all comebacks, man.
And all right, so now look, you mentioned Jay Coco and you mentioned Patriot J.
Mm-hmm.
I've been given clearance to mention the Hatocracy.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's time for us to let the world know through the ColemanNation podcast who really controls things on the internet.
Yes.
Tell the people about the Hatocracy.
So you have been chosen to reveal our existence to the world. No, okay, I'm not going to go full Boondock Saints on you there, but the Hatocracy was an interesting idea because at first it was just an impromptu group chat of us where we just all got together and just laughed about the one troll that we did on the internet. But then it grew. I started recognizing the potential of it, and if you haven't noticed the theme, one of my core abilities that I've never understood why I have, because I'm actually fairly introverted, is being able to create groups and bring people together. And, that's something that I ended up doing. I was like, you know what, this is cool. Let me go ahead and start adding a couple more people because, man, this is actually a cool group of conservative personalities. And
well, maybe because you're an introvert, you're more sensitive to the kinds of interactions that work for you, as opposed to people who are just, like a politician, whatever comes along, they'll kiss any baby,
Yep.
You're a little more selective. And now and this is a this is a private DM group, which means that all conversations in the Hatocracy are open to Jack Dorsey, who I'm sure doesn't give to Hoots. And this is, there's two sides of this DM stuff. I mean, people are always DMing me with their legal issues. Now, that's a problem. I always tell them, listen, here's my email address. Okay, let's start this conversation from scratch. You don't have an expectation of privacy. But people who are hanging out and talking, I'm not yet aware of anyone having a problem because of stuff that came out in a DM. On the other hand, it's not private, but we do have a lot of fun. It's both, and of course, we're all bodybuilders.
Yeah. Man, I know. You guys inspire me daily.
I mean, it's how many guys in Hatocracy are not, workout guys besides me.
You know what? It's interesting. We had a lot of people have picked up working out, like Adonis has, Jake has. Of course, it's me, Matt, Dave. Of course, Dave, man, he's built like a tank. I remember he went on Timcast. That was one of the things people remarked. Whoa, this guy's built like a tank. Lobe liner,
how about lobe liner?
The man, it's so funny meeting him. I grew up watching Mark Lobliner. Let me tell you, that was one of my early fitness inspirations back when I was a pudgy preteen. So,
of course, I don't bring that to the table, but I bring the name of a workout legend to the table. Big Ronnie Coleman, of course. For those of you who are not familiar,
I know.
With the issue. All right, so here we are having our usual, the in and out, threading in and out, sharing silly tweets and silly replies. And you guys are good sometimes when I want something boosted. A lot of people there are big influencers. So that's good. And then one day someone says, they got Malcolm.
I know.
They got Malcolm. And that was that, and we had been noticing in the last week or so that you were getting mighty ragged. Was anything going on in your personal life, or like what was it that you were getting really harsh? And people in the group were predicting that you were on your way out, and you finally hit that button.
It's interesting because when I do a reply, something like that, like I'm never angry. That's the funny thing about it. Some of my most savage replies come from me just like looking at a guy's profile pic, busting out laughing. And, it's interesting. At first, it was just me being defiant. When I first had my counter ratio, my first counter ratio tactic, I was just having fun with it. I was like, you know what? Conservatives, normally people put their account on private, go into shell. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to have some fun with it. So I just started replying to everybody just with the first thing that came to mind. And it just sort of became a defining trait that I became that roast guy. And I just perfected the craft. And one of the key things is if I have to look at somebody's profile for longer than, let's say, 5 minutes to come up with something to say, I pass it. So look at all the replies I do. You can tell.
We can't.
Yeah, I know.
They're gone, and they're probably gone forever. Now, I will tell you that the Hatocracy has urged me to beg you to find a way to come back. And I said I would pitch, and I actually told them put together a video, and I'll throw it up on, but they're a bunch of lazy guys. They didn't put it together. But you're missed, I will tell you. So let's talk. The subject of this, the ColemanNation podcast, is supposed to be, eventually, with every guest, we talk about freedom of expression and cancel culture. Here, do you think you were banned for saying something nasty, like anyone else would have been banned for saying something nasty, or do you think you had a target on your head because you're a conservative influencer?
Oh, I can already tell you I had a target on my back. And, it's actually, I probably, in retrospect, it was because I had just did a segment with Kara and on One American News. And I think that was the scarlet letter. That was the sign. Hey, this guy's getting a little bit too big. He's too feisty already. He's got the look, the intelligence. Okay, we got to do something. And it was on a post where I was actually talking about why we should defend Nick Fuentes' right to speech, that I ended up getting attacked by these same people that would end up reporting me. And that's the irony.
I wish I had the GIF handy. That's bait right there.
I know.
When you get onto one of those super hot, so they also got the Gab account, wow. The official Gab account, because and they said something actually nasty. They said why? Let me see if I can find it. And this was actually a little bit distressing to me because I used to represent Gab, and I know these guys, and I do know that they were a little bit hot-headed, but this was really unnecessary. And it doesn't mean I think it's okay that they got kicked off. I actually am against that. Here we go. The tweet was, son of a gun, come on. Oh, it's actually, now it's gone. It was like, why should Jewish supremacist organization decide who can be on social media? I think they're referring to the ADL. Now, I trash the ADL all the time.
Yes.
But I will tell you, as a Jew, if the ADL were a Jewish supremacist organization, maybe they would have a job to do. What they are is a Democrat talking points supremacist organization. But that was a nasty tweet, and they're gone. But I guess my point is that I am I do think that there are certain issues that like you said, first is the profile. So is there a list, color coded list, and you were maybe on the auburn, on the yellow list.
I moved myself up a little bit, a few tiers.
And then like look for that moment when he steps over the line. But here they didn't. And I do think they do try to find a non-political way. Like, for example,
yes.
Right. So if they can say you're using multiple accounts or you're gaming the program, that's better for them than using it explicitly. But I mean, I would have no problem finding finding tweets every bit as nasty and personal from left-wing accounts. Yes. And they've been directed to me as well. I mean, I'm sure they have been to you.
Yeah, that was what that's what prompts these. I don't attack anybody unless they attack me first personally. And that can be insulting intelligence, insulting looks, or just saying something that's just out of pocket. Normally, I'll try to, at the very least, just give you a little bit of a condescending answer if I feel like you're responding to me in bad faith. And the reason why I even got to doing that was because you can't have good faith arguments with these people. You can't talk to them and at the end of an exchange, meet in the middle and come with a good, like, okay, I see your point, but I disagree. That never happens anymore. Nowadays, everybody's trying to score points for the tribe. So I was like, you know what? If the game is already dirty, then screw it. I'm going to go full camo. I'm going to get in the mud. I'm going to be the dirtiest SOB you guys have ever ran up upon. And it worked for a long time. And
it was. I mean, you were getting, well, when you say it worked by achieving what?
Oh man, I cultivated a very, it's to cultivate an attitude amongst conservatives that I feel like we need, which is become a fighter. Why are you sitting up here cowering when these people knock at your door and sitting up here like, oh, you're just doing this. Imagine if it were the other way around. Like, I get so sick of that. At some point, you've got to realize that you're in a war. It might be a war of words. It might be a 4D war. It might be an informational war, but you're in a war. Decorum and, being coof and expecting a referee to come save you doesn't work. And, my timeline, they took on that personality. When I started, one thing that you notice that whenever I get into these spats, the people on my timeline are probably a little bit more vicious than I am. Like, they're fighters now.
So let me ask you a tough question. It's a question that people ask me too. Let's say that we're achieving these things in terms of the Twitter battles.
Mm-hmm.
Does it translate into anything beyond Twitter when we change the way people look at how to have these engagements?
Can I tell you? Can I tell you how many times that I've been stopped in public and somebody said, "Hey, are you Malcolm? Dude, I love your stuff, man. Yeah, man. You don't take no for an answer because it's more than 10." And right then and there, again, it's law of averages. I may not capture every single body with my message, but if I can get at least 10 people to take up that message, and they can get 10 people, and they can get 10 people, and their people can get 10 people, eventually it does happen. That's how movements start.
You're winning hearts and minds.
Small spark.
Winning hearts and minds.
Yeah, and you have to. And for, if you want to cede the control of your country, then don't try. But if you want to do something, you have to start small sometimes. Sometimes it is just winning a Twitter battle, but sometimes it goes viral and does things.
Now you're off the battlefield.
I know. Miscalculation, unfortunately. But, while I might have leadership qualities, I've never fancied myself as a leader. I like to be very gritty. I like to be in the thick of things. I hate sitting back. And, maybe it's for the better. I don't know. Okay,
so in other words,
not.
Yeah, probably not, right?
No.
I think that the guys should give you time to figure out where and when and how you reappear. I mean, I don't see, when I wanted to replace the Twitter timeline as my chief, at least starting point for research on you, there wasn't all that much out there.
I know. I'm a relatively hidden guy, and that's by design.
Well, it makes sense also because you are still using I'm sure that Daddy and Mommy Flex are very proud of you.
Oh yeah, they all the time, because outside of Twitter, even in life, again, I'm well above the median income for my age range, and I've got quite a few career accolades in my relatively young career. So I've done pretty.
You think you as a black guy can get away with more than a white guy could in terms of being a conservative? Or is it the opposite? Maybe it depends on the environment you're working in.
I don't know. It really sort of depends just a little bit more. For me, anything that I do is going to be more magnified because I'm one of few. For a white guy doing it, he's going to be, they'll attribute it to the whole phenomena of conservatism. Whereas Black conservatism, that's hard to say, is a much smaller pool of people. So I will stick out more. The things that I do will stick out more. They'll probably make headlines more readily than the things that a white guy will do. But at the end of the day, the things that the white guy does is pretty much going to be like almost attributed to the whole movement. So it's going to reflect more so on the movement, whereas what I do reflects more so on me as kind of an anomaly, if that makes sense. So
I think it does. I mean, to some extent, I can share that experience because I'm an Orthodox Jew who's in the conservative movement. And although there are quite a few of us, many of them tend to be quiet for lots of reasons.
Right.
It's a different flavor of sticking out. But I mean, people are now listening to this and saying, this is a really interesting guy. And when this podcast is over, how do I get more? What can we tell people? Are you going to find a way to get back into the game?
I'm still trying. And here's the thing. There's a difference in accepting, but not bowing down to your fate. I've yet to bow down to my fate of basically being the platform, but I've accepted it. And, I do know that it happens to some of the best.
I cannot tell you how important that is. I know some very prominent people. I don't want to name names because I've been known to represent at least one of them, who it seems has lost the will to live.
Yeah.
Because of this. And if that's your whole life, I mean, listen, I've got a nice following, and being online is a really important part of my life. And it's an important part of my practice. I get a lot of clients, and I got a lot of referrals for clients through it. And I like having the ability to speak to people about
Yes.
things and to persuade them and to win a heart or mind from time to time. But every day, and especially at least once a week on the Sabbath, I'm reminded that I can't say it's not real life, because everything that we're doing is real life. To the extent that anything in this world is real life, this is real life also. These are real friends. People, you absolutely could. I remember there are people who I had never met in person who, when we met each other, we hugged. There's real genuine affection there. So you're right. You have to accept that nonetheless, if it happens, if the plug gets pulled on you, you might want to think about how you make a comeback, but your ability to go on can't be dependent on that.
Oh yeah, no, I've, and again, I understand I'm not the norm. There are a lot of people who, they get a taste of the fame and they want to chase the dragon. They want to get back on it. They start really craving that endorphin hit that they got from seeing those numbers. But at the end of the day, they're just, they're numbers, they're representations of what you can do in your actual community if you put your mind to it. Yes, it's more accessible on Twitter. Yes, it's more accessible on Facebook, Instagram, whatever platform you choose. But it's at the end of the day, it's just a representation of the potential that you have to really add that same amount of following and clout and whatever you've amassed on the platform to your real life. So go out there and do it.
Yeah, I'm entirely confident that you're going to do that. Whether we see you again soon on Twitter, it is almost besides the point. The best case scenario is to be, if you're not on Twitter, nonetheless, they're still talking about you on Twitter. You're doing stuff.
Pull up that Jack Posobiec tweet, and that was that shocked me that it was over 8,000 people that liked it, and just all the big name blue checks and whatnot that now have found me on Instagram that are like, hey, when are you coming back? When's your suspension over? And just seeing all the people like, no, holy crap. And again, within earshot of Nick Fuentes' banning, it still made such a wave. Like, to imagine something like that really tells you, man, I did that. That's awesome. Yeah.
But so you're making actually a little bit different point, which is fascinating, which is that by virtue of being suspended, you were able to actually get a sense of what you meant to the people who were following you.
Yeah, man. When you're algorithmically suppressed on such a regular basis,
it sounds like something from your research.
I know.
Algorithmically suppressed.
We should actually look on the mental effects of algorithmic suppression on not even just conservatives. That's incorrect. Conservatives aren't the only people that are suppressed. Granted, they're the canary in the coal mine for it, but they're not the only people. But that would be something to study, is the effects on the mental states of those that are just suppressed, because it does do something. You start to question your worth if you don't have a very good sense of who you are, and you're very externally motivated.
Now, can I throw up your Instagram page?
Oh yeah, go right ahead.
Malcolm_Flex48, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that guy doesn't look exactly like you look right now.
I know.
So I don't want either of us to be embarrassed.
The camera is.
That's you?
Hold on. Let's see.
Flex your success?
Yes.
Man, you are
a mad lad.
You are a mad lad. And we love that about you. Malcolm, the Hatocracy is not the same without you, and neither is Twitter. I'm sure you're going to, one way or another, you're going to reappear. It's great talking to you. I really appreciate you taking the time. I hope your meeting earlier today was another smashing success.
It was a lot, a lot less exhilarating, but it went.
Let's stay in touch by all means, and maybe when more interesting stuff, the time comes to talk about it, we'll do that. Okay. And you learned a lesson. When I was your age, I didn't have the opportunity. There was no Twitter. There was barely an internet.
Did you guys have cars?
We had cars, but you had to. Your feet would come out of the bottom of them. Right?
Oh, so you had.
But you really had to be in shape if you wanted a highway speed.
So that's when we got to see God body Coleman. That's back
In those days,
the
man,
body of
I
God.
was so ripped.
Ah, man.
All right, buddy.
That's what a career in law does to you.
All right, have a great weekend. Thanks for taking the time.
All right, Ron, you do the same.
So long.